Imagine an old witch with a prosthetic leg jumping over graves at midnight to command the dead. Her name was Nonci, and she lived in Baia Mare in northwestern Romania. She kept ram horns and stolen shirts hidden under her bed, ready to cast spells to heal, curse, bind, or protect. To her, magic was how she kept the world in balance, no matter how dirty her hands got in the process. My name is Radiana, and I shall introduce you to one of the most renowned witches in Romanian history. Folk magic and witchcraft have deep roots in Baia Mare, where generations of local healers, seers, and cunning folk practiced a variety of magical and healing arts. From herbal remedies and charms to fortune-telling and love magic, these traditions were an integral part of everyday life, often carried out by women who served their communities as trusted healers and sages. Throughout the centuries, Baia Mare experienced several waves of witch trials, most notably during the 16th and 17th centuries when scientific medicine and Christian demonology started changing the way people thought about health and spirituality. And again in the mid-18th century when fears of diabolical witchcraft and vampirism led to widespread investigations and prosecutions. Despite the social upheavals and official persecutions, folk magic persisted, adapting to changing times and maintaining its significance within the local culture. The multicultural makeup of Transylvania, including Baia Mare, deeply influenced these traditions. The region's diverse communities of Hungarians, Romanians, Roma, Saxons, and Germans shared and adapted folk practices. Remarkably, these endured well into the 20th century. Despite centuries of persecution and modernization, the legacy of folk magic continued to shape local communities long after the formal witch trials had ended. Such is vividly illustrated by the life of Nastasia Pop, known as Nonci, whose story comes to us through the extensive fieldwork of Pamphil and Maria Bilțiu, who documented her case before she passed away around 1970. Through repeated direct observations and interviews, they recorded her biographical details, her views on charms and magic, and her vast magical heritage. Nastasia was born around 1880, somewhere in the countryside. As a young woman, she moved to the city of Baia Mare, where she Magyarized her name to Nonci to attract both Romanian and Hungarian clients. She became known among the locals as Baba Nonci and Nonci Neni, although she preferred to be called by the latter. Baba means hag, old woman, or grandmother. Yet it is not merely a neutral age descriptor. In Eastern European folk traditions, Baba is a woman endowed with deep wisdom and life experience. The term conveys respect and acknowledges her role as a wise woman and guardian of the old ways, though it can also carry pejorative connotations, much like the English word hag. By contrast, neni means auntie in Hungarian. It is a polite and affectionate form of address for an older woman who is approachable, kind, caring, and feels like family even if she is not a blood relative. Both these terms reflect the two essential aspects of a folk witch: venerable wisdom and everyday care. In multicultural Transylvania, where diverse ethnic groups lived side by side and shared cultural practices, such affectionate titles transcended linguistic and ethnic boundaries, symbolizing the witch's inclusive role, especially toward marginalized groups. Nonci Neni's kindness and services extended to these communities, reminding us that folk magic was an essential form of social support and empowerment for those living on the margins. Despite her old age and having a prosthetic leg, Nonchi Neni would walk at night to the cemetery to perform necromantic rituals and even jump over graves 6, 9, or 12 times. She was known as a friendly woman and an excellent maker of homemade jams, which she would serve to her clients before discussing their troubles. She earned well from her craft, and with the money she gathered, she made it her ideal to become a godmother to children and young couples. She considered herself all-knowing in magic. When asked if she could solve an issue, she would reply in Hungarian, "De hognem," meaning "of course I can," and then she would laugh and exclaim the Romanian saying, "Don't you know that what the devil cannot do, the old witch can?" Nonchi was not secretive by nature, except when it came to other women. If 2 or more arrived together, she would only see one and kindly ask those not directly involved to remain in the kitchen and treat themselves to her homemade jams. She feared other women might steal her craft, a concern that used to be common among folk witches. After all, in this tradition, magic isn't formally taught. It is absorbed through observation. If someone has the talent for it, simply watching another practitioner is enough for the knowledge to take root. Nonchi believed that women are the most powerful spellcasters, and so she often attributed her clients' misfortunes to cunning women. According to her, these women were everywhere, causing all kinds of troubles, and the one who undoes their magic must know their ways in order to drive them away. Nonchi was deeply respected not only for her craft, but also for her generosity. She often shared money and food with the poor, especially with Roma families. Her pantry was always stocked with gifts from clients, bacon, sausages, smoked hams, and poultry, and her yard bustled with chickens, ducks, and geese she had received. She continuously supported her godchildren and grandchildren with money, food, and new clothes for the holidays. And when she lent money, she never asked for it back. Over the years, Nonchi acquired a rich arsenal of magical items. The ones that she used most often were kept under her bed, wrapped in old clothes, while the ones she used more rarely were hidden in the attic. Most of her magical instruments were objects that had been discarded, which she considered dehazna, meaning deeply effective for spells, precisely because they had fallen out of ordinary use. The richest category of her magical tools consisted of sharp metal implements, such as the axe, knife, scissors, needle, and crochet hooks. Alongside these were other worked metal objects like the padlock, horseshoe, stove tongs, fire poker, and the metal-toothed comb for carding hemp and wool. These items reveal much about both the provenance and cosmology of folk magic. Worked metal has always held a prominent place in Romanian and wider Eurasian magical traditions. The belief in its ritual power can be traced to the ancient metalworking cultures of the Carpathian-Danubian region. Metal was seen as containing transformative power, forged by fire, born from the depths of the earth, and molded by human skill. It was thus imbued with both chthonic and solar energies. In many traditions, sharp iron objects like knives, scissors, or sickles were placed in thresholds, cradles, or graveyards to repel spirits or cut through baneful influences. Their cutting edge symbolically cuts through curses, bindings, and negative forces. Similarly, in Slavic, Baltic, and Balkan magic, padlocks and keys represent the power to close or open fates, mouths, conflicts, and life paths. Furthermore, these metal objects were deeply tied to domestic and agrarian life. They linked the witch's power to the sustaining, life-giving work of the household and the workshop, reflecting the reality that folk magic was woven into everyday material culture, not separated from it. The fact that Nonci preferred discarded metal items speaks to an old magical principle that what is rejected by human society retains liminality and potency. Items found at liminal sites, such as crossroads and graveyards, or those that have lost their social utility, are free of ownership and thus can be claimed for spirit work. The use of worked metal in folk magic is also reminiscent of the broader mythic figure of the smith as magician, a widespread motif across Indo-European and Eurasian traditions. The witch, like the smith, reshapes reality by using objects forged from the hidden ores of the earth. Both professions were once regarded with awe and suspicion for their transformative capacity. Thus, Nonci's metal implements were not merely practical tools, but also embodied cosmic technologies. Another major category of her magical tools included household weaving implements, such as the beam, shuttles, spindle, and distaff. These tools are deeply embedded in the magical cosmology of Romania and Greater Eurasia. Weaving tools carry profound symbolic meaning because weaving itself is associated with fate, destiny, and the thread of life. The weaver is thus aligned with mythic figures like the weird spinners or ursitoare in Romanian, who have the power to create and transform reality. In her magical arsenal, Nonci also had many shirts that she used as stand-ins for people. Some were brought by clients and never retrieved, and others were stolen from the clothesline where they were left to dry. She also used abandoned combs, belts taken from the dead, and threads from the priest's liturgical brush. Taken together, these tools reflect a magical heritage rooted in agrarian life, cosmic symbolism, domestic knowledge, and folk ritual technologies. They speak of a witchcraft that is deeply interwoven with household rhythms, ancestral crafts, and the seasonal cycles of the land. Nonci's practice thus embodies the principle that the true witch draws power from the everyday world, seeing every object as a vessel of hidden meaning and potential transformation. For spell work, Nonci combined these tools with natural elements, often of a taboo nature, such as elderwood, thorny wild rose, and dogwood. She also used items of animal origin, such as hedgehog skin and chicken feathers, especially black ones. For protection, purification, or as agents of harm and influence, she drew upon a wide array of foods and substances such as salt, pepper, paprika, wheat grains, beans, coals, water, frankincense, and quicksilver. She would ritually prepare these items and substances. Water, for example, had to be untouched, meaning collected fresh before any human or animal use to maintain its primordial purity. She often gathered it from 3 or 9 springs with her mouth 9 times against the current. Sometimes the water was incanted over or blessed. She also gathered dew from village hedges before sunrise and collected the water left behind after washing the dead. Nonci performed her magical practices in places widely recognized in Romanian folk magic as thresholds and liminal spaces. These included the attic, village hedge, cemeteries, crossroads, the hearth, and streams or rivers, especially where the water turned back on itself in whirlpools. Like other witches, she performed her rituals during magical times, such as midnight or after the rooster's crow, which is believed to banish evil forces. She also practiced at sunset and sunrise, and her preferred day was Thursday, considered the power of the week in the Romanian folk calendar. Nonci had an exceptional reputation, as reflected in her vast clientele that came to see her from all over the country. She was recommended by word of mouth, and that created a web of trust around her that no advertisement today can replicate. As she herself proudly stated, the efficacy of her magic made her threads travel far, confirming the ethnographic observation that in traditional societies, reputation is a witch's most valuable currency. Nanchi amassed her magical knowledge through direct tradition and cunning apprenticeship. As a curious young woman, she visited all the wise old women she could find, especially in the historic Maramureș region, where, according to her, there wasn't a village without a witch. She posed as a client and she softened the old women with the gifts of homemade jams, which she learned how to make from her grandmother. She collected her spells bit by bit. In her own words, from one witch she learned 2 or 3 spells, from another 3 or 4, until her head was full of them. Yet Nanchi was no mere imitator, and her craft carried her own personal touch. Because folk magic, while rooted in tradition, is also a creative and adaptive art where each practitioner contributes their own innovations and intuition to its shared knowledge. Furthermore, her relocation from the countryside to Baia Mare urbanized her craft a little because it positioned her within new social networks. Her popularity in the city primarily grew due to her accurate tarot readings. For example, she once told a man that his wife would leave him, and that is exactly what happened. Those who researched her case were also present when she told an army colonel that his wife was going to die and urged him to prepare for her funeral. Furious and believing that she was lying, the colonel wanted to hit her. But the researchers intervened and encouraged him to check. When he called home, he learned that while his wife had been washing clothes, the cauldron of boiling water had overturned onto her and she had died. To another client, Nanchi predicted that he would lose all his money, and it happened quite literally. His wife had hidden the money from selling a plot of land inside 2 sacks of wheat. While she was away visiting relatives, he took the sacks to the mill without knowing about the money, and it was all ground up along with the grain. Besides tarot reading, Nanchi also practiced bean casting for fortune telling. On traditional feasts such as St. Andrew's Day, Christmas, New Year's, and Epiphany, she also taught unmarried girls how to divine their future husbands. She would also use such occasions to forecast the weather and harvest. While divination was an important part of her craft, Nanchi also performed magical practices for integration, transformation, and restoration. So she was not afraid to get her hands dirty, and she believed she could fix and set everything in order. Ethnological research confirms that the world of the traditional village was conceptualized as an ordered cosmos in which each individual had to actively participate to establish and maintain their proper place. The expression to arrange one's life thus meant to bring one's existence into harmony with this cosmic and social order, a process in which witches like her were indispensable mediators. Through her craft, she tried to alter the social, emotional, or material conditions of her clients, and her rituals served a variety of troubles. Women often came to her desperate to break up their former partners and their new lovers. To help them, she used a special stick that had once been used to separate a snake from a frog. She would hide this stick up her sleeve, visit the couple's home, and walk between them whispering, "Just as I separated the snake from the frog, so may these two separate and never again stay together. May these two come together only when the snake and the frog unite." This spell worked on the idea of impossibility. Since the snake and the frog could never truly be together, neither would the lovers. She also had other ways to break couples apart, like secretly blowing into a wolf's gall she wore at her chest, or throwing horseradish and pepper between them. When women were fighting, Nonchi would burn an old cloth in a clay pot and stir it with a broom handle while incanting charms to restore peace. Then she locked and unlocked a padlock, saying that the mouths of the women would stay shut until they made peace. In folk magic, padlocks were often used this way to end fights, stop chains of deaths in a family, keep wolves away from animals, or protect crops from birds. Nonchi also had many ways to stop someone from getting married. She would take a dead person's belt and hide it under their pillow or clothes to block the marriage completely. For temporary delays, she tied 3 or more knots, reciting charms to keep them from marrying for as many years as there were knots. She also sprinkled the person with water from the dead while saying they would only marry when the dead do, meaning never. She also did spells to make people hated or shunned, often young girls. She would mix water from washing the dead or boiling Easter eggs with dried cat, dog, or human waste. This mixture was then thrown at the target to pollute them spiritually and thus make others avoid and reject them. However, Nonchi also performed reintegration rituals to restore people to their normal state if they had been magically harmed or contaminated. For example, to help a man whose sexual power was believed to be tied by a curse, she gave him a woven net used for carrying hot pots. He had to tie 9 knots in it, fasten it between his legs, and walk across a valley. As he crossed, he untied each knot and turned stones in the stream whilst reciting a charm to release his power and bring it back to him just as the water flows back down the valley. Nonchi saw her craft as a tool for restoring balance as she understood it. To her, magic was a way to navigate the messy realities of life, where healing and harm could be 2 sides of the same coin. It's no surprise that she would even call upon death to restore the balance she believed in. When asked by women to remove a rival blocking their chance at marriage, she would take clay from the rival's footprint, shape it into a doll, dress it like them, and hide it in a hollow tree. Every morning at dawn for 9 days, she'd prick the doll's heart with 9 needles. The ritual was believed to cause the rival's death and thus restore the client's place with her former partner. Though harsh, this shows how deeply people believed in these spells in a world where love and marriage meant everything. Another powerful ritual Nonchi performed was unbinding sorcery, which meant healing someone who had been bewitched. According to her, bewitchment manifested as a severe illness that affected the entire body. She would pass the bewitched patient through a horse's harness while reciting charms. She then made a doll from a weaving loom beam, dressed it in a shirt stolen from the suspected bewitcher, and beat it with an abandoned broom while chanting commands for the illness and evil spirits to leave, saying they had no place to stay or eat there. Then she passed an axe 9 times through the neck of the stolen shirt while chanting that all sorcery and sickness be cut away and returned to whoever sent them. And finally, she spun a distaff backwards with the bewitcher's shirt on, chanting that all weakening and curses be undone and sent away into shadowless forests. Nonchi also cured alcoholism to restore order by straining brandy through the shed skin of a snake while saying, "Just as the snake cannot drink, so the drunk man cannot drink as long as he lives." She then gave the brandy to the drunk man's wife to serve it as his usual drink. The witch also removed curses that caused social imbalances, such as those cast on girls to prevent them from marrying. For such rituals, she collected water with her mouth 3 times on 3 Tuesdays and 3 Fridays. She would then enchant it and give it to the client, who had to wash her face with it and throw it over her head while reciting charms that asked the water, created pure by God, to remove the hatred and curse that kept her unmarried. Nanci's versatile craft and mastery served virtually any client ailment. She truly aimed to help people, even when her methods might seem harsh to us now. She believed her practices were necessary to restore balance and set things right. Unlike some modern stereotypes of witches motivated by greed, she was known for her generosity and modest demands, which contributed to her wide popularity and respect within her community. In her late 80s, around 1970, after a life of magical service, Nanci passed away while returning home from a client visit, and her body was found in a ditch at the edge of a forest. Her reputed reliance on diabolical powers for some practices and the unusual circumstances of her death confirmed in the minds of many the folk belief that witches' fates are often tragic. Nanci's story is a powerful case study of how folk magic adapts to meet the needs of its community. Her life and craft show that folk magic has always been a living practice that changes alongside society, yet remains rooted in a fundamental principle. It is of the people, for the people. Despite centuries of persecution, marginalization, and criminalization of witches and cunning folk, practitioners like her carried forward these traditions not as rigid doctrines, but as creative, responsive arts to social troubles. Her spells are part of a rich toolkit constantly reinterpreted to address the shifting troubles, desires, and conflicts of those around her. She understood that magic was not abstract, it was enacted in specific contexts. A girl abandoned by her lover, a man unable to sell his goods, and 2 enemies threatening community peace. Moreover, Nanci embodied the mythical figure of the old hag so deeply rooted in Romanian and wider Eastern European folklore, where the limping crone is thus marked to signify her otherness. The motif of the lame witch comes from archaic shamanic initiations in which the person would be dismembered and rebuilt by spirits. This often resulted in the symbolic or literal loss of a limb or bone. Nanci, with her prosthetic leg and craft, fits into this folkloric lineage of the limping crone. She also embodied an ethic largely lost in the modern monetization of witchcraft. She did not charge fixed rates or advertised her services as spiritual commodities. She did not extract wealth under the guise of energy exchange. Instead, her clients gave her what they could, and she offered what she had: her knowledge, her charms, and her reassuring rituals. She had a deep understanding of the moral duty within folk magic. Today, many self-proclaimed folk witches operate within a digital economy that prioritizes branding, fixed pricing, and spiritual consumption over genuine relationships. There is little resemblance between these curated social media personas and Baba Nanci, who practiced in muddy courtyards, barns, forests, and graveyards, armed with her bag of herbs, old charms, and profound empathy. The historical power of folk magic lies precisely in its refusal to be standardized. It was never purely about personal gain or entrepreneurial coaching, but about restoring balance, addressing injustice, curing illness, or enacting revenge when law or morality fell silent. Baba Nonci is a reminder that witchcraft was, and at its heart remains, an ever-changing communal resource embedded in a moral economy, not a capitalist one. Her memory invites us to ask, what does it mean to be a folk witch today, when so much of original folk magic has been confined to spiritual consumerism? And what might it take to revive a practice that walks, even with a prosthetic leg, into the muddy heart of human suffering to transform it simply because it can? Until next time, remember, what the devil cannot do, the old witch can.